Hello, hello. Happy Monday and welcome to our weekly Monday Live. And I think today's topic is a very important topic. And this topic is really, you know, planning your destination wedding during COVID. So this is particularly good for people or couples who are within this group who are looking to plan a wedding in 2021 and beyond. Because COVID right now, even though there's a vaccine, it's not going away anytime soon. And as of today, it's the worst it's ever been. So if you're really thinking of having a destination wedding, these are some things you need to take into consideration while you're planning to have one. And, as I said before, love is really not canceled. People are still getting married. People are still traveling. It's a matter of what do you feel comfortable doing. So this is something you first need to discuss with your partner. If you want a destination wedding, is it really something you want to do? And how do you feel about traveling during COVID? So, the first thing I'm always going to tell people is you need to test the temperature of your guests that you think you want to invite. I mean, how many people do you want to invite to your wedding? Are you inviting 20, inviting 40? How many people are actually going to want to travel? So this is something you need to kind of upfront ask all the people that you're thinking of inviting, that you want to do a destination wedding. Would you be willing to travel? Because that's going to decide also how many people are going to attend your wedding. So to me, I would even before I announce a place or anything, just take the temperature of all your guests to see who's willing to travel this year if you're planning to do a wedding this year. So that's the first thing I would do. But what I'm going to start with is just my experience traveling during COVID. I've traveled 3 times last year. The first time I traveled to, I live in New York, so I took a car ride upstate New York to wine country with 3 other couples, and we stayed at a hotel. So we drove for 4 or 5 hours upstate, stayed in a hotel, and when we got to the hotel, their protocol was all the employees and all the guests had to wear masks because we're in a closed environment. So in the hallway until you get to your room, you had to wear masks during check-in and when you're in the resort. The resort had restaurants. When you're at the restaurant, you wear your mask to the restaurant, but when you sit down, you're allowed to take your mask off to eat. So that's what their protocol were. And we were outside also. A lot of people were wearing their masks if they weren't social distancing, but if they're further away from people, they weren't wearing their masks at the time. So that is what my experience with going to a hotel upstate New York. Also, when you go to hotels, most of the time they have free coffee in the lobby. Those are, no touches. I mean that they eliminate all those things. Like, if they had like free danishes and stuff, they didn't have any of those in the hotel. They eliminate all those because those are high touch area, and they don't want our guests touching these things over and over again and spreading germs. Also, they had sanitary, hand sanitizers at the front desk and throughout the hotel, so they try to keep the guests safe. So that was my first experience traveling during COVID in September. We all went to the hotel, all 8 of us. We came back, none of us tested positive or had COVID, so I felt safe with that. My next trip was a flight I took in October to Florida. So on that flight, we're all required to wear masks at the airport and on the airplane. And then we got to Florida, we wore masks to get the car rental, and we went straight to my mother-in-law's house. There was no requirements to quarantine anywhere. We were going straight to her house. Nobody met us at the airport. We didn't have to fill out any health form. We didn't have to get, nobody took our temperature or anything like that. So flying from New York to Florida, I found it, we all had to adhere to the mask wearing at the airport and on the plane, but there was nothing else that was different about flying. You just had to keep your mask on. And we went to Florida and back, and I guess we came back safely because we didn't get COVID. My third experience traveling through COVID is when I went to St. Lucia in early December. So for St. Lucia, the requirements to travel there is that we had to get a negative COVID test, a PCR certified test, within 7 days of travel. So if we're leaving on Thursday, I had to get my COVID test the Friday before, and we had to have the results with us when we got to the airport. We also had to fill out a travel authorization form to to, on the government website to get approval to come into the country. It also requires that we stayed in a COVID certified resort, meaning that in most countries, all the resorts have to be certified, COVID certified, meaning that they have put health precautions or protocol in place, so when the guests get there, they going to be safe. So most resorts cannot be open unless they're certified by the government, because they're putting health protocol in place that these facilities have to adhere to in order for them to open and operate. So for us to get to St. Lucia, we had to stay in a certified resort that's already approved by the government. Or if we weren't staying in a certified resort, we have to stay if we're like locals going back home, we'd have to stay in a government facility for 14 days, to quarantine for 14 days before we can go out on our own. So if you're, most of us are going to be traveling as a tourist, so you can go straight to a resort and you don't have to quarantine while you're on resort. So in planning a destination wedding, as I said before, the most important thing is just knowing how many guests you think are willing to travel with you to the destination you're going to pick. When you're looking for a destination, you need to look at what the requirements for that country is, the COVID requirement for that country is to enter that country and to go there. So for me, picking a destination is definitely key. And I'm just going to read a couple of countries and their protocol to let you know what each country's protocol is, and if that is something that would be okay for you to adhere to in order to get to that country. So for Aruba, they have like a 5-component requirement. They want you to fill out a basic travel information. You need a proof of a negative COVID test, and you need insurance coverage as well as a basic health assessment. You also have to consent to Aruba's government mandate. So they want you to do all these 5 things in order to enter their country. So, that is something you have to think about. When you go to Bahamas, travelers 11 and older need to have a negative COVID test within 7 days and apply for a Bahamas travel health visa. And they can also hop up into getting COVID health insurance. And what is COVID health insurance? A lot of countries are offering this to travelers that are coming to their countries. And really what this COVID-19 health insurance is if you say get a negative COVID test and you travel to a country, but when you get there, they somehow test you and you are positive for COVID, you're going to be either required to quarantine for 14 days before you can get back to the United States. And it's going to cost you, it's going to be at your cost to quarantine for 14 days. And most time it's in a facility and they're going to charge you money. So having this COVID health insurance, and most time it's not really that expensive, it's either $50 to $100. It just covers that cost of you. If you test positive for COVID and you're in that country, any medical procedures that you want, or any medical thing that's going to take care of you, and also whatever facilities you're going to be in, that will cover the cost of that. So that is just an added insurance that just in case you get sick with COVID while you're on vacation, you'll have some kind of coverage that will take care of all that expenses. Because as I said, most countries, if you travel there, you have COVID, the cost of you to get medical help or to stay at a facility is going to be at your cost. So this is something you really need to consider while you're traveling. Do they offer this COVID insurance while you're traveling, and should you take it? For Belize, you have to provide a negative COVID test within 3 days of arrival, or you can take a COVID test when you get there, and that would cost $50. So you have 2 ways of getting the COVID test. Either take it before you get there, or you take it once you get there. If you're negative, I guess you can go to the resort that you're going to. For Bermuda, anyone 10 and above, you have to do a travel authorization form, which costs $75 for adult and $30 for children 9 and younger. And you also need to have a negative COVID test within 5 days prior to departures. And if you're staying longer in Bermuda, like if you're staying longer than 4, 8, or 14 days, you have to retake a COVID test. So they're very, very adamant about, making sure they're protecting the people that if you stay, the longer you stay there, you have to take a COVID test to make sure you're still negative. So that is something you really have to consider if you're picking any one of these countries, what their protocol is. Like for Costa Rica, right now, Costa Rica does not have, they eliminated the COVID testing, but you're required to complete a health pass and provide proof of travel, medical insurance, and any COVID-related medical treatment or quarantine. So in going to Costa Rica, they don't require a COVID test, but they want you to have medical insurance just in case if you get sick there that you're going to be covered. For DR, I know a colleague of mine just came from DR, and they said they felt safer there than being in the US because, of course, the number of COVID related incident is less there, and also they felt safe in the hotel. So, but for DR, they don't require you to show proof of a negative COVID test, but they can randomly select you to do a breath test to see if you have any symptoms for COVID. So traveling to DR doesn't require a COVID test. With Jamaica, it does require a COVID test 10 days before you travel, but it have to be at a certified PCR location. That is something you need to be aware of because you just can't do a COVID test at any location. Have to be PCR certified, otherwise they won't let you enter the country. And also you have to fill out a travel authorization form. You also have to stay within, they call the resilient corridor at a certified COVID facility. So within Jamaica's, their resilient corridor is the I would say the three areas which most tourists would be Ocho Rios, Montego Bay, or Negril. So there's hotels along that zone that are all certified, and if you are going to any one of those hotels, you have to, when you fill out the form, select which hotel you're going to, and it has to be on that list. So they require that you stay at a certified COVID certified resort. For Mexico, they don't require for you to take a COVID test, but they do temperature checks when you get to the airport. So you might be, have to take temperature checks to make sure that you're okay, but they don't require you to do a COVID test before you get there. In St. Lucia, which I just came from, they require you to do a COVID test 7 days before you travel. And also you have to fill out a travel authorization form and agree to, the health protocol and screening while you're there. So for me, what I would say is the most important thing for you in planning your wedding is trying to figure out what country you're thinking of having your wedding. What are the protocols that are in place in that country? So you can tell people ahead of time, like, all right, if I'm going to Jamaica, you need to do a COVID test 10 days before. You have to do this. So at least people are aware what they need to do before they are allowed to enter that country. So once you pick a location, that you feel comfortable having your destination wedding, then the next thing would be picking a resort. And as for what I say, the resort you would pick right now during COVID are all been certified. So they have safety protocol in place. So to me, that would be easy. It's just picking a resort that you really like. Most of them are going to have a safety protocol in place, and most resort, all the staff wears a mask, and they have protocol in cleaning the room and in getting the resort clean so people feel safe when they get there. So to me, that won't be the hardest decision. The biggest decision to me is picking the right country and what their travel protocols are, and if you feel safe going to that country. But for a destination wedding at resort, that might look a little bit different because of COVID, most resorts are limited the amount of people you can have at a wedding. So that is another important thing you need to think about. When you pick a resort, you need to ask how many people are allowed to attend your wedding, so you're not caught off guard later on if you're bringing 100 people and you only allow 50 people because of social distancing, that you cannot invite 100 people to your wedding. So that's something you need to ask the resort that you're interested in having your wedding. What's the limit on how many people can attend my wedding? The other thing is there is no buffet at these weddings anymore. One time you can just do a buffet and people can just go up and eat what they want. It's going to be plated. So, just be aware that they're just going to serve you your meal. You're not going to be touching food in an open area. And most resort does not have buffet anymore. If they have buffet, it's the staff who's serving you and you're not touching the food. The other thing is most events are going to be held outdoors. So, it's going to be on the beach, the gazebo, garden. It's going to be away from other guests. So you have a private location. So all your guests can be in a space that is just them only. So it probably won't not be inside because that's a closed area, and that's where we're trying to get away from. We don't want to be in a closed area. Prefer an open area, so it's safer if you're in an open area with a limited amount of people. For room decor and amenities, I know this because I have a client who's now in Jamaica, and they're at a resort and they celebrate a birthday. There's going to be much more limited amenities in the room, and also what the resort will do for you. Like, I wanted balloons or champagne or just something extra in the room. They're not doing those things anymore because of COVID. They're not putting or are offering these services to you anymore. So if you want your room really decorated, you're probably not going to have that because of COVID. But from a wedding standpoint, they're still doing decor. They're still doing those sort of things. So I don't think your wedding is going to look any different because of COVID. You can have that. It's just that amenities in your room might be different. I know someone was at a Rio hotel. They don't even have liquor in the room. They don't have sodas or water. If you need anything, you have to go to the bar to get it. So that's a little bit different for me. So that's something to think about, like, what are the amenities that I can get, or what can I get, or what has changed because of COVID. So these are things I would say you need to ask the resort, what is different. So in your mind, you can at least prepare your guests, or you'll know personally what is going to be available and what's not going to be available when you get to the resort. So if you're planning to travel or plan a wedding during COVID, what are the key things I think you should consider? First thing, you need to do the research on the country that you're thinking of having your wedding, to see what the travel protocol is to get to that country, and if it's something that you think your guests will do or willing to do. Do you need a negative COVID test? Do you need a travel authorization? Do you need to get a COVID insurance? These are just things you need to figure out and do research to see what it takes for you to have or to travel to that country. The other thing I would say is, what are the resort protocol? Is there a limited number of persons you can have at your wedding? What are their safety protocol? Are all the staff required to wear masks at all time? How do they clean the areas that are used by everyone? Where do they have their entertainment? How do they have their dinner set up? Because most restaurants right now, they do reservations. Most time it would be no reservation, but they have to do a reservation to make sure that there's not too many people at the restaurant at one time to keep the limited space in. So these are things that are going to be different when you get on a resort. So, you need to ask these questions. Is there, most likely the resort is going to be certified. So, they pass the safety protocol required for them to be open. I would probably ask, or no, has there been an outbreak in that resort at all? I know I saw something recently, Sandals, Grenada. They had an outbreak of COVID. Either the employee had COVID and passed it on to people. So there was a small outbreak in there. I know the resort closed down, so they're redoing whatever their safety protocol is to make sure that doesn't happen again. But it's something we probably need to do some research on to see, what has happened in that resort. Have there been a lot of incident of COVID? Also, for the country, I would also want to know how many cases of COVID that's been in that country. For me, St. Lucia right now, as of yesterday, have 450 cases of COVID. So imagine that we're in US where more people are dying than people have COVID in St. Lucia. So since COVID started, they've only had 450 cases of COVID. So to me, when I got there, I felt very safe. At least I know the people there don't. 99% of them do not have COVID because it's just not a big outbreak in the country. So the safety protocol they have is very good. Jamaica have a couple thousand, but for an island, it's still a small amount of COVID cases. So you need to look to see, in Mexico, is there more in Mexico than in DR? Do you feel, this is something you really have to do some research on to see what is it that it's important to you if you're making that decision to have your wedding. So I would definitely look to see, what safety protocol that resort have in place. And you can easily find that online because most resort actually put what their safety protocol is. They seal the door after they clean it, so that when you get into your room, you see a seal on the door. No one else has been in the room since it was clean and certified. So that is something that's good to know. So you can do that. Get travel insurance. Like if I was putting a group together for a destination group, I would always suggest that if you're doing a wedding, a package, a room package, you would get insurance on your room. So just in case something happens and you can't travel, you have that insurance that you can get the money back for your the money you spend for your room. There is also wedding insurance. There's some insurance company that would offer you insurance on your wedding, just in case something happens and you have to postpone or cancel your wedding, that you know you're not going to lose your money. I know I did a wedding in Jamaica in August. The wedding was originally in June, and we had to change it because the resort was closed in June, but the resort was open in August. And we just moved the wedding. It didn't cost us anything. We worked with the resort, and they, you know, they knew the resort was closed, so just gave us an alternate wedding date, and we just moved everything over to that. So the resorts are willing to work with you to see if something should happen and your date has to change. They'll work with you to move your date over to another available date without charging you any money, because they know, you know, it's based on what's going on the reason why you have to cancel your wedding. So, you know, think about getting insurance independently if you really feel that you're not sure of what can happen. But at least for your room packages, I would suggest people get insurance on their room just to protect themselves. The only thing I can say about insurance, because COVID is a known pandemic, most insurance are not covering COVID as a reason why you cannot go. So you have to think about the reason you're going to put if you have to change your plan, that you can't just use, I don't want to go because of COVID. It has to be a reason. Are you sick? Or is your job not giving you time off? You know, what is the reason? So you don't use COVID, because then your insurance is not covering you for COVID, because you know when you book that it was a known pandemic. So you can't use that as a reason why you can't go. So please be careful when you think about that. So, you know, as I said before, you know, make sure you kind of reach out to your guests that you think you want to invite, so they know you want to do a destination wedding. You're thinking of doing in this country. It's someplace that they would want to go, because you want to make sure that you have a good head count. You know, people change their mind later on, but at least you know who's interested in going if you're doing a destination wedding, so you can plan accordingly. And I would say with the COVID vaccine out there, maybe this year is going to be easier for you to be give you more assurance that hopefully you're not going to get COVID if you get the vaccine. So hopefully between now and when you have your wedding, you would have gotten the vaccine and everything, you know, will work out better. So having the vaccine there, or hopefully available in the next couple of months, is a good indication that maybe you can plan your wedding because you're going to be vaccinated and hopefully you won't get COVID. So that's a good thing. And I guess the thing is, as I said before, think about when you get to that country, if you should get some kind of insurance just in case something should happen, like you get sick because you got COVID and you have to quarantine the country for 14 days, because that expense is going to be on you. So think about, is there any insurance that you can get, you know, health insurance, whether here or through the country, to cover you just in case something should happen if you do get to the country. And then last thing to remember is, like, most time when you come from certain countries, like anywhere I come from, I come to New York, I have to quarantine for 14 days. So think about if people are traveling and they're taking time off from work to go to your wedding, when they come back, they have to realize that they might have to quarantine for 14 days at home before they can go back to work. So that's something that they need to be aware of. So, you know, when you're planning for that wedding, they either have to make sure their boss is okay that I'm going to be working from home for 2 weeks before I can actually physically come back to work. So that's something people don't think about, but you have to think about it, because traveling through COVID, you just can't come home and go on with your life. You have to quarantine. So that's definitely something for you to think about. So as I said, I wouldn't say, you know, people shouldn't plan your wedding, or think about it, because it's really, as I said, a personal decision. I personally, if I was doing a destination, I would plan one, because people are getting cabin fever. People want to go away. And it's just that I've seen a lot of people travel over the last couple of months or more, and they seem to be very comfortable traveling. They also feel very comfortable when they're at the resort. So, you know, those are things. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just getting on the plane and getting to your location is the biggest hurdle that you have to cross. But as I said, you know, if you need any information on COVID or any specific country and their requirements, I would say go directly to that country's website, because they're going to have the most up-to-date information on planning on their protocol for entering the country. So I always say start with the country's website to get what their requirements are, because that is ever changing. And with this COVID vaccine, it probably will change later on. Maybe they won't require it anymore because most people are going to be vaccinated. So definitely, I think it's more of a challenge planning your wedding during COVID, but it's possible to plan wedding. People have had weddings and they've been very, very successful at having their weddings. So it's just that it just takes a little bit more to plan and to execute the wedding, because there's more things to think about than just the wedding. Think about COVID and its impact and what you need to do to prepare you and your guests so you can have the wedding that you've always dreamed of. So if you have any additional questions or any information you'd like to know, please leave me a message. I am here available to help you plan your wedding. So as I said, I'll be on here on Wednesday answering frequently asked questions. So as usual, if you have any questions that you need answers on, please feel free to just leave me a message and I will answer your question on Wednesday. So until next Monday, I will see you again covering another topic on Destination Wedding.